how the West debt-trapped the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, the richest country in the world. Now, it should be said right at the top that the DRC is the richest country in the world by resources. On the other hand, it's the poorest country, one of the poorest countries in the world for standard of living, stuff like that. So, honestly, the Congo is not in great shape, so let's just get into the meat of this article. The Democratic Republic of Congo presents a stark paradox, okay? A nation immensely rich in natural resources, yet is one of the poorest in the world. This contradiction is deeply rooted in the country's complex history of exploitation, particularly by Western institutions that hold the majority of Congo's debt. Now, the DRC is endowed with exceptional natural wealth, including vast mineral deposits of cobalt, copper, diamonds, gold, significant hydropower potential, a lot of rushing rivers, extensive arable land, which means great farming, good sun, healthy soil. They have immense biodiversity, meaning there's so much wildlife and so much interconnected stuff. They haven't poisoned their atmosphere and their biosphere like we have in the West, where we're depleting our soil. And like, I'm sure they have some plastic bags floating around, but for the most part, there is a lot of natural beauty still kind of untouched too. And also the DRC has the world's second largest rainforest. So the DRC is a very rich country in this sense. Now, despite these resources, an estimated 74.6% of the Congolese people lived on less than $2.15 a day in 2023. Now, that's making DRC one of the 5 poorest nations globally. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a rotten deal. Now, if you get the bad end of the stick when it comes to colonialism, it's time to redo the whole thing and start paying full price and leaving countries alone. Call me old-fashioned. Look, the roots of this disparity lie in the country's long history of exploitation, which began long ago in colonial rule, and it continues today through unfair economic practices and these debt structures. Now, China is often blamed for Africa's debt problems, but the reality is Western institutions own the majority of Congo's debt. Okay? Private Western creditors, particularly American and European investors, hold a large part and a fast-growing segment of African debt. But also multilateral institutions like the IMF and the World Bank are significant lenders to African countries, including the DRC. The emphasis on Western private lenders is crucial, as they often charge higher interest rates compared to other creditors. So you find that China doesn't charge you the juice as much as other countries. So we're really doing, you ever been to those paycheck places where they give you a loan on your paycheck and they charge you like 20% interest? I did that when I was a kid. Terrible idea. Should never do that. You end up paying way more and they make out like bandits. And I always feel bad for people who go to those places and also go to, what do they call them? Pawn shops. You know, I've been there.
Those are the two places that only cater to the most desperate people who need money at that exact moment, have no other option whatsoever, and are willing to pay the exorbitant interest. It's like that literally is what usury is. And every religion has banned that in their holy books for a reason. It's like one of the earliest, most barbaric, unjust practices, and it was one of the first things that people thought of as soon as they conceived of the ideas of capitalism, creating wealth out of just screwing other people without creating anything of value whatsoever. It's like that's why people hate it so much, because it is the usurious and the lecherous nature of capitalism really distilled down to like one practice, right?
Yeah. I don't like the idea of that money lending for a certain kind of end goal. I think it's kind of rotten. But yeah, struggling with the motivation to help somebody out just from goodwill is not good enough. You know, you have to have something monetarily of equal value to trade somebody. And so I'm not surprised that this is the way it is. But at the same time, people get taken advantage of when they're in a desperate spot. And these countries in particular are in precarious financial conditions where they would not say no to any kind of loan, just the same way that my mom couldn't say no to these, what were they? these mortgages, these loans that they were giving out in 2008 that crashed the whole economy. These non-fixed loans that after your premium expired, you'd have to pay, 200 times more, whatever, up to 2,000 times more. And they purposefully gave them out to people that had bad credit or whatever. They didn't care. They knew that they would make money by writing down debt as a form of wealth from these people. And that they just, but it dissipated and disintegrated overnight when these premiums expired and people had to pay full price for their mortgage and stuff. And that's the same thing. They're preying on poor people. It's predatory lending. Okay. So this debt structure has several implications for the DRC. High debt servicing costs drain resources that could be used for development and poverty reduction. So as they have to pay their debts, they really don't have the ability to pay for anything, including social programs, education, fixing roads, everything that they actually need to better themselves. Debt conditions also often come with stringent economic policies that may not align with the country's development needs. Now, we talked about that before. That's forced privatization, forced deregulation, and austerity, forcing the poor people out into the street. Belt tightening
even
measures.
bureaucratization. Like, people take that for granted, the bureaucratization. I shared 2 links in our general chat in our Discord. They're both Instagram videos. I don't know if we want to stream them at some point, but they're both related to this article. One is Michael Parenti talking about how the underdeveloped countries are not underdeveloped at all. They are overexploited. And it's exactly the theme of this article, that you can be the richest country in the world in material wealth and resources and mineral wealth, but be one of the poorest countries because all of that wealth is being extracted and siphoned away by Western interests through financialization. And then the other video is someone talking about how what we were taught as children about these global South and African countries in particular being corrupt leaves out the nature of that corruption. It leaves out the fact that Western influences are putting those leaders there because they are friendly to Western interests. They're friendly to that financialization, and they're the ones that allow that wealth to be extracted. And then when someone comes along and repatriates that wealth, tries to upend that system, tries to do something good for their people, they are swiftly dealt with, as we will soon see.
Yeah, and as it goes, it's like, well, every country has politicians or presidents that come in and then they go out. They come in, they go out. They come in, they go out. And what happened in a previous administration, everybody who comes after him is going to be held responsible to those debts or whatever he inherits from this. So it's almost like once there's one puppet president who takes these bad IMF loans and then squanders it and buys himself a house in the Bahamas, that debt gets saddled on to the next generation of people who had nothing to do with any of that. And that's the real sad part about this nation debt. And the complexity of the debt structure also makes it difficult for the DRC to negotiate favorable terms of debt relief. So they don't have any power to understand the mess that they're in. They're in a bureaucratic heap of trouble because they can't even get through to the legal mumbo jumbo that this stuff is written in and get the resources they need. You need a team of lawyers. You need people that know their stuff. And we have purposefully made our world, the white post-colonialist imperialist world, where we steal with a pen instead of a sword and a piece of paper and a contract. They can't compete against the legalese that we've created. It's too bad.
Again, but to just be clear, that's not even the goalie. If there is like a main obstacle, it's like to think of it in terms of like a hockey or a soccer metaphor. It's like that's only one layer of the obfuscation. The legalese and all the structural colonialism, as far as like the legal fictions around it, that's only the obfuscation because, again, I know I just said it a couple seconds ago, but I have to hammer home that once you get past that, even if you conquer the legalese and are able to figure out the contradictions in the way that wealth is extracted from the owners of it, the people who actually live on that land and have the real claim to it, even if you were able to overcome those contradictions legally, that's when you'll find the stick rather than the carrot. That's when the military force comes out. So it really is just like the curtain. It's like the thing that prevents you from getting to. I guess I'll continue with the soccer metaphor and say the goalie again. You're only attacking the defenders when you're going after the legalies. It's like when you get to the real goalie, that's when you start encountering the real resistance.
Yeah, that's when and then you also get the feeling that you're close.
Mm-hmm.
When you start getting a lot of pushback, you're doing something good. I could say that about a lot of activists or anybody out there who's stirring up trouble. If you're getting death threats and people putting dead cats in your mailbox, you're probably rattling the right cages. Keep going. I love that movie, The Insider, with Russell Crowe, where he takes on the tobacco company that he used to work for, and he had evidence that it was poisoning people, or that there was extra chemicals in it that was, that people didn't know about. And they harassed him, and that was a real thing. They did. They sent him death threats, everything. They did everything they could to try to blackmail him into.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So, the DRC's economy remains heavily dependent on its mining sector. So, which it grew 15% in 2023, contributing around 70% to all the economic growth. But this rarely trickles down to the general population due to corruption, mismanagement, unfair trade agreements, ongoing conflicts, particularly in resource-rich areas, lack of infrastructure, and economic diversification. So you got these big companies, either from China, and China is big on the cobalt and everything out there. They're really trying to get there's companies that do own quite a bit of it. Not as predatory as America, but still pretty bad. I mean, it looks like they're trying to vertically integrate all of their stuff, and it's a hot item that they need and stuff. But, these companies come in from the West and stuff like this, and they set up shop and they go in there and they say, we have the machines, we'll extract all the stuff for you and we'll pay you 10%. And the government really doesn't have a leg to stand on and says, okay. And then they say, well, you're already in debt to us, so why don't you just let us take our big machines and go take some of these diamonds out, or this cobalt or whatever. And they really don't have much they can do about it. So, the situation is further exacerbated by the country's vulnerability to climate change-related risks, political instability, and weak institutions. So, like I said, climate change is another big thing. Out of all the countries that are really going to get hit hard, they're in exactly the right spot. They're going to lose a lot of biodiversity, so they say. There's a lot of analysis and predictions that say these places will get hit hard, and because of their massive population, like this part of the world is increasing in population pretty steadily. They might have serious migrants and refugees running out of that place. So something to consider. So up next, your favorite part, Mike, it's the debt trap fun facts. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Need a little music montage. Do, 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 do. So an estimated 74.6% of Congolese people lived on less than $2.15 today. I said that before. So that's making it one of the 5 poorest nations in the world. About 1 out of 6 people living in extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa lives in the DRC. The mining sector grew about 15% in 2023. An estimated 400,000 people were living in what you would call modern slavery on any given day in 2021. So that's a lot. That's 4.5 people per 1,000 are slaves. That's maybe something we shouldn't be doing. Call me crazy. Call me old-fashioned. Tickle me pink. I don't think that slavery is so hot. I don't know. I don't get what the big hubbub is. Like,
really,
everybody's like, it's great.
It's a hot take.
It's a hot take, right? Slavery, I just think maybe we shouldn't do that. I don't know.
Brave.
We'll see.
Brave.
Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Slavery, yay or nay? Let me know. Jesus Christ. Oh, I promised I wouldn't curse anymore. Sorry, people. In industrial cobalt mines, workers face extremely low pay, lack of contracts, small food rations, abuse, and discrimination. Children in the DRC are subject to forced labor in mining, including mining of gold, tin ore, tantalum ore, and tungsten ore. Cobalt, exported from the DRC, enters the global supply chains to create goods such as electric cars, solar panels, and mobile phones, to which they see very little of the profit. The DRC had also the highest number of new conflict-related displacements of any country in 2020, with 2.2 million displaced. So even we're talking about Palestine level injustices. Congo really takes the cake as far as getting the bad end of the stick. They got the rotten end of the deal every time. And the last debt trap fun fact today is 97% of 10-year-olds in the DRC are in learning poverty, which means they cannot read or understand simple text. So there you go. A country that is steeped in poverty and not even from its own choosing, but from a post-colonial afterwave or aftershock, whatever you call it, aftertaste. This is the same story with African Americans in the United States, where we try to gloss over and water down their struggles and say, yeah, that was before, though, like slavery's over and now they should really get their stuff together. It's not so easy. Just in your father's lifetime or your grandfather's lifetime, white people and black people couldn't share the same bus sections, or they couldn't be at the same bar. Black people were not allowed to do anything that white people could do still, even though they were considered free. So in the case of the Congo and the colonial era stuff, for instance, in South Africa, it's something like most 70% or more of the farmland is owned by only 7% of the population who are white. Because the white people are a very small minority in South Africa, yet they control everything still via businesses, via land, via factories, stuff like this. So we should talk a little bit. Yeah.
Would you say, because it's like an interesting microcosm, like the racism that goes on here at home, where well-to-do middle-class white people can work in their office jobs and their Zoom gigs and say that they are just naturally inclined to inhabit that position, that class, whereas they sort of genuinely believe that all the people of color who are working in the actually valuable gigs, like manual labor, all the actual hard work, and getting paid cents on the dollar compared to like the comfortable air-conditioned workers. It's like that is that same white supremacy that extends from the first to the third world, where people can consciously know about all those third world workers and still think that they're in that position because they just haven't worked their way out of it generationally, I guess, or just nationally. They're not as intelligent or able to maintain a democracy, so they're just inherently corrupt in some way that they can't overcome yet. It's that same exact white supremacy that just is spread all throughout. The illusion or delusion is among the liberals who think that they are any better than the conservatives, who are outward about their racism, who openly say it's good that these immigrants are in that lesser place, that position of being subjugated. Whereas like the liberals go along with it and then think that we're going to fix that with half measures, by reform, by, I don't know, just like slow and steady neoliberal capitalism for another 3, 7, 20 generations, like whatever it's going to take until we achieve some kind of equality, even though that has not happened in the 200 years we've been doing this finance capitalism thing. Yeah, it's all racism at its core. It's just a matter of how much you're deluding yourself about it.
Yeah. And I think we would probably enslave anybody based on any very small, indistinguishable differences, like whether it's skin color or language, or they're short and we're tall, or we're big and they're small, or whatever. I think no matter what, we might have that. But in this case, it has been largely predicated along the lines of race and geographical differences and cultural differences. Well, they do things a different way, so they're just savages, and we should just treat them any which way we like. And this is 2024. It's still a common attitude. So, not great. But, this all started from the colonial era, which was slightly more brutal than what we have today. Now it sort of appears like it's more humane and stuff like this. In the colonialization of Congo in 1885, when King Leopold II of Belgium established the Congo Free State as his private property, this whole period was characterized by unimaginable cruelty. You had forced labor, which was widespread. Congolese people coerced into harvesting rubber and other resources. Failure to meet quotas, often resulting in severe punishment, including kinds of mutilation and death, like cutting somebody's hand off and making them work twice as hard with one hand. It's estimated that about 10 million people were killed during this guy's reign, Leopold. He was one of the worst, really. We'll have to do a whole smear piece on this guy, because he was like Hitler. Like, him and Hitler could get along great in a hostile bunkhouse. They'd have a great time. The brutality was so extreme that the population of the Congo was reported to have fallen by 2/3 by the colonial conquest in 1924. Ethnic cleansing, whatever you like to call it, genocide, slavery, torture, rape, murder, exploitation, all the fun words that get reiterated over and over by people like me. In 1908, following internal pressure, the Belgian state took control, creating the Belgian Congo, where some reforms were implemented, though the colonial system remained super oppressive. You had racial segregation and discrimination were institutionalized, so it was just like anywhere else that has Jim Crow laws, for instance. You had Congolese people that were denied political rights and participation in civil society. This is typical among colonial enclaves and satellites. The economy was structured to benefit Belgian interests at the expense of the Congolese population. Wow, that sounds so familiar to what we were just discussing at the beginning of this episode. Who'd have thunk it, people? And of course, after these Belgians come back and they say, okay, we kicked out the bad man, Leopold, now we're going to take... There was still forced labor, but it was less overt. It wasn't so up in your face. You know, they made it look differently. Disgusting. Just disgusting stuff. So the post-colonial, which I say with a big grin because this is not really the case. We're still in the colonial. But the post-colonial predatory lending, after gaining independence in 1960 now, the DRC faced new challenges, including economic exploitation through predatory lending practices by Western institutions. This is the modern form of exploitation that bears striking similarities to these colonial era tactics. That's what I was trying to tell you guys. The parallels are a little weird. So you have resource focused. Both systems of old colonial and new colonial both want to extract the Congo's natural wealth for external benefit. They both there was a power imbalance where colonial administrators and modern financial institutions wield this disproportionate amount of power. You have a poverty cycle where, despite Congo's vast resources, both systems resulted in poverty. Old colonial, new colonial. Either way, it's people not doing so good. And, of course, limited sovereignty. You had colonial rule denied political rights, while modern debt obligations restrict economic self-determination, like like when the IMF says, hey, you can't have any social security for old people. You got to pay your debts. And you said you were going to, and by contract, you have to. And if you don't, guess what? We're going to send in the U.S. military and we're going to overthrow your government. Is that what you want? Because we'll do it. I'm going to count to 3.
I mean, it's literally what it's like. One of the famous pictures from colonial Congo, Belgian Congo, was this man who's staring just very dejectedly at a small hand, a severed hand on the ground in front of him. He's sitting on like the porch of a shack, and it was his like 2 or 3-year-old daughter's hand, and they cut it off because he couldn't bring back enough gold or whatever mineral he had to harvest for the Belgians. And this was just common practice. If you didn't bring back enough gold, they would maim your kids, and that was like common practice, was cutting off the hands. And a big, sticking point for anti-imperialists and Marxists right now, is talking about this genocide in Gaza and pointing out how this is such common practice, and the fact that Americans are ignoring that. And now their big sticking point for Biden is that he's demented. He literally is senile, and that is somehow worse for them than the fact that he's openly been committing this genocide and signing on to it every way possible. So yeah, it's just really disappointing, but it just goes to show that this is what the white supremacy I was talking about earlier is all about. It's talking about someone like Hitler because he did this to white people and Europeans, rather than talking about King Leopold or any other of the colonizers that have objectively been far more brutal and committed far more atrocities to many more people. But because it was done to brown people, that is not part of history the way that Hitler is the ultimate evil. And again, not to excuse Hitler, that's something that always gets misconstrued, but it's just the white supremacy inherent in the framing.
Yeah. No, believe it or not, Hitler can be bad and other people can also be bad. It's not mutually exclusive there. There can be many, many villains. So, I mean, it's really sad. It's sad to see that it go down the way that it's going down for not having learned our lessons from hundreds of years ago and growing up with this idea that no, we used to be savage and now we're getting better and things are different and things, but there's so many things that are underneath the surface that are disgusting that we don't believe in. Like, we think that the guillotine was a brutal way to kill somebody, but now we take them 100 fucking miles away from town into a prison and take them into a dark room with cinder blocks and inject strange chemicals into their arm to kill them that way. It's all just sort of the same, isn't it? It's bizarre. We're just monkeys just going around doing monkey stuff without really thinking about why we're doing it. And we have a lust and a proclivity for violence. We love violence and we love oppression and we love getting the things that we want and we love power. And no amount of gizmos and modernity can take away this fact. We love to have sex, eat fried chicken, and beat people up. That's all humans are really capable of doing. So I'm going to go on a rant here, folks. This was my section here. Tell me what you really think about the Congo. So here we go again with the sanctimonious preaching from Western institutions about human rights and democracy. All they gleefully shackle countries like the Congo with crippling debt and pillage their resources. It's enough to make one vomit up their overpriced fair trade latte. Now, these pompous bastards strut around in their bespoke suits, waxing lyrical about freedom and dignity, as if they weren't the same cunts who carved up Africa like Christmas turkey not so long ago. Now they've traded in their pith helmets for World Bank lanyards. But the game remains the same. The bloody same. Oh, but we're helping them develop. Yeah, they simply are conveniently ignoring the fact that their so-called aid comes with more strings attached than a puppet from the Royal Opera House. It's a financial glory hole where Western institutions get their rocks off while the Congolese get royally fucked. And let's not forget the delicious irony preaching about human rights while turning a blind eye to the child labor mining cobalt and their precious fucking iPhones. It's enough to make Orwell spin in his grave fast enough to power half of London. Now, the colonial mentality is alive and well, my friends. It's just traded its musket for a Mont Blanc pin, signing away the futures of nations with the same ruthless efficiency as their mustache-twirling forebearers. The white man's burden has come, the white man's bailout. The natives are still going to get screwed, no matter what. So the next time some mealy-mouthed bureaucrat starts pontificating about the glories of Western democracy, remember, behind that facade of moral superiority lies the same old imperialist bullshit. Now with new shiny PowerPoint presentations. God save us from all these self-righteous, resource-grabbing wankers.